Training camps are opening across the NFL. It's a thing of beauty, really, for all the millions that have waited for what feels like a century since the last whistle sounded in New Orleans in February. In this NFL season, we'll see a lot of crazy things, from wild and improbable finishes to ridiculous catches. Your friend's probably going to lose a little more than they're supposed to on a 3-team parlay in the late afternoon card, and overall, we should have a lot of fun. In a league that promises chaos, I'll be tasked with providing you my ultimate prediction for the 2025 NFL season. Of course, this is all pure speculation and BS, but that's pretty much the point and the fun of the video, so let's get started. Starting in the AFC North, I have Cincinnati finishing 11-6. You have Joe Burrow, who is on pace to be a Hall of Fame quarterback here. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are both retained for the season, which was a little surprising. Plus, you had defensive struggles last year, and that'll be the main thing to overcome for Cincy. The stadium chaos, though, has been settled, and you do play in a tough division, however, which did have you losing a lot of close games last year. Some of those can maybe flip for Cincinnati and boost the record. Problems could end up brewing with Trey Hendrickson not getting a deal done when he was one of the only bright spots of last year's defense. You'll definitely want the guy to get after those AFC quarterbacks like Mahomes, Jackson, and Allen. Finally, the Bengals were able to complete their deal with Shamar Stewart, and I've actually been on the call for one of his games at Miami when he was with Texas A&M, and can certainly speak to the fact that the guy can play, so this needed to happen. Thankfully, he seems to be good to go, and I'm sure any of the turbulence will be left behind quickly. It's a gamble to pick Cincy first and not in the wild card spot because of the defensive holes, but if these young guys hit on defense, this team can definitely contend for the Super Bowl with a stacked offense and a likely future Hall of Fame quarterback. Baltimore at 11-6 too, but I say they lose the tiebreaker. You retain a great coach and quarterback, both Hall of Fame guys, Lamar Jackson. You also have Harbaugh in there, and all-pro defensive players like Roquan Smith. Even with playoff disappointment, the roster is still one of the top rosters in the league, and Derrick Henry is another beast in the running game with Lamar Jackson. That's going to be amazing offensively. The challenge will probably be keeping the defensive core intact in the longer run as the team continues to struggle to try and get to the Super Bowl in the postseason, and you'll have a tougher schedule here in the AFC North, but that's of course nothing new for this team, and the ability for the Ravens to run the ball is really good for the type of weather you play in late in the season. Ground and pound can also keep Joe Burrow off the field when he plays Cincinnati for the division title. The Ravens are a very competent and competitive organization, but the critique of Lamar Jackson and his playoff games are going to continue until Baltimore wins the Super Bowl in this era, and that's just the way it's going to be. Good luck to them. The Pittsburgh Steelers at 8-9. Aaron Rodgers not that much of an upgrade at this age and state, and the team has been nothing more than pretty good in recent years. Have 2 Super Bowl contenders as well to fight in the division with the Ravens and Bengals, and this defense will keep them in games. They did spend a lot of that on that side of the ball, but the offense mostly might limit this team, and the pressure to move on from Mike Tomlin isn't helping. At some point, you think that the Steelers might try to at least rebound, almost like the Chicago Bears with their coaching quarterback move and go to something else, but the defensive line might be the best in the NFL with TJ Watt and Cameron Hayward, who have both been amazing. Definitely a concern that we've seen the best of the Mike Tomlin days, and that with the current quarterback situation being temporary, it's just hard to get too excited about a run knowing Rodgers will be limited at his age. In Cleveland, just 4-13 at most major sports books. You'll see the Cleveland Browns have the worst over-under total of wins for the 2025 season, and right now this team is struggling off the heels of the Deshaun Watson contract. That thing just didn't work out in more ways than one, and even if any of the new guys like Shador or Dylan Gabriel end up working out back there, how much are you going to expect from them in the first year? This team needs several good drafts to build things back up, in my opinion, and the schedule is looking kind of tough, and last year the team had the most difficult schedule in the NFL and finished as 3-14, so I'll give them another win at 4. Just feel like the Deshaun Watson ordeal and all the ripple effects of that contract and backing will be felt for a little bit longer before Cleveland rises again. It's just not the right time to ascend in a tough division, but it probably won't ever be in the AFC North. The Buffalo Bills, I have winning the AFC East at 13-4. The Bills have done plenty right over the last few seasons, but just not enough to get them over the hump of the Kansas City Chiefs in the playoffs. You're led by a good Josh Allen. Sean McDermott helps the defense, which has been mostly pretty good despite finishing sort of middle of the pack last year. Joe Brady seems to know what the heck he is doing as an OC when the offensive numbers have been magnificent in his time, and I think the Bills should remain steady as you get into this year, considering that all 3 other teams in the division have stuff to prove. You did have several picks in the draft, and most of that was focused on defense. A guy like Joey Bosa should also really help, even if he only has a couple of years of prime left. You need somebody that's going to get after Mahomes or Burrow, and with the Bills and really the Ravens and Bengals, the story is kind of the same. I mean, they're all capable of much greatness, but their season probably comes down to a game against the Chiefs, and they rarely seem to win that that one for one reason or another, so we'll see what happens with the Bills. New England is 9-7 to me in 2025. I think a lot of people thought Gerard Mayo was an interesting hire going into 2024 from the standpoint you were trying to part with the Bill Belichick model, but then kind of hired a disciple of his. It just appeared that Mayo was in over his head, and from the outside looking in, and with Mike Vrabel having good experience in the NFL, he should be able to lead this team to something. Also had another draft class, and Will Campbell should be great for the offensive line and in the run game, where the Patriots need bigger holes for a variable offense. And another bonus was signing Stephon Diggs. I mean, some believe he can turn on the team if things go south, but I highly doubt that's going to happen early on here, and he should help out Drake May a bit. Plus, hopefully his big injury is not going to be too much of a burden to his production. The Patriots will really need to find ways to move the ball and perhaps lean into the run game with that O-line for a bit to create less pressure on May and see what you can do. And so that's kind of the game plan for New England to win some more games. Right now I have the Jets finishing just 7-10. It's just hard to trust the Jets with much, and we've kind of seen what was supposed to be a prime defense fall short in the last few years. The Aaron Rodgers experiment is over, and perhaps new head coach Aaron Glenn can spark some fight into the defense. Interestingly, the top picks for the Jets were on offense, but you'll need to protect Justin Fields, so I can't hate picking up Armand Membu out of a good SEC school in Missouri. It's always the kind of spot you want to get your offensive lineman, but just in my opinion, without going too deep into the Jets, we had a similar hire already, and I think we're going to see similar results. Aaron Glenn was an excellent coordinator with the Lions like Robert Saleh was with the Niners, and now you bring him in and against an uphill battle in New York. Just not sure this is going to end well without a great quarterback and everything. Miami at 6-11. I think Miami is an offense that's really changed the league under Mike McDaniel. They're capable of some crazy things, and they've been with the motion concepts from McDaniel and his offense that have been great. Of course, you need a defense, and that's where the Dolphins were actually decent last year, but maybe not good enough. They did kind of stop some oppositions, and the Dolphins are hoping that Kenneth Grant and Jordan Phillips can also help things around on the defensive trenches, but you also brought in some linebackers in free agency to help the cause. I mean, the Dolphins were decent against the run last year and comparable in their passing defense too, so this is where I'm thinking that the team just needs offensive consistency to, bring a leap this year, but I don't see that happening. And in saying that, I'm just very concerned about the health of somebody that leads this offense like Tua Tagovailoa. If he gets hurt again, we've all seen these scary concussions, just, not sure he should be in or how long that's going to last. And if he's down, you're really going to be tested at that spot, and that can kind of screw up the entire offense. So I'm going to guess that Miami is going to finish with just 6 wins. We're in the AFC South, and I have Jacksonville 10-7 winning the division. You have a new coach in the system in Liam Cohen. You had an aggressive draft in a division that isn't the strongest, so that could pan out. Feels like Trevor Lawrence should be able to put up a decent season, at this point, and if not, you're probably moving on. But the team went heavy defense in the draft, and that was probably the right call because only the Carolina Panthers gave up more yards, and that's considering this wasn't the best offensive division. If the defense does improve, you'd also help the offense from having to pass under the pressure of a deficit as much as that, that could keep Lawrence from turnovers too. And one big problem here for Jacksonville is the offensive line, which hasn't been rated in the top half of a lot of lists going into the year, but the outside could be a big thing for this team, and Brian Thomas made the all-pro team last year with the Jags, plus Travis Hunter should be getting snaps at receiver, and we'll see what he can bring to the table. The big thing for Jacksonville is the first-year head coach. Best of luck to Liam Cohen, but we'll see if he can actually give Lawrence a boost, who hasn't had the greatest results in the league over the last few years, and in the QB's defense, he has had to, have so much different coaching at this point. It's unbelievable, and it's been pretty insane to watch the turnover, but the Jags will take advantage of a weaker division, and I think they beat the Texans head-to-head to end up capturing this division with 10 wins. Houston, I also have at 10 wins, but I am a little concerned with the C.J. Stroud regression. Pro Football Focus rates this team also to have the worst offensive line in the league going into the 2025 season. A lot of the times, that's not where you want to be, and they just got rid of Laramie Tunsil and Shaq Mason too, who might have been the best pieces of that line last year. A big plus for Houston is the defense, which created a turnover margin of 10 last year and created havoc for Justin Herbert in the wild card game. And the Texans will have to hope they found some diamonds later in the draft too, because they did not have a first rounder, but there are plenty of great players well past that round. I think they did good to focus on offense when, as we just mentioned, the defense was less of the issue. Hopefully Cam Robinson and draft pick Arante Irsay out of Minnesota will help the offensive line, and with the defense where it is, the division being less competitive than others, the Texans should finish at about 10 wins, and I see them competing for the division again, but I'll say that they lose the tiebreaker to Jacksonville. Tennessee at third at 7-10. Well, you got the number 1 pick Cam Ward, and I think he should be at least okay. You got a full new system and staff, and that means a slower start, I would guess, too, with Ward. But turnovers were a big problem last year, and the team was minus 16 in this department. And honestly, even with a rookie quarterback, that team should really do a better job. I mean, you need to see some life note in the coaching tree this year of Brian Callahan, and it shouldn't be too tough of a division, so you would think you would contend for a playoff spot for a decent bit of the year. It'll be pretty fun to see if Ward will gel as well as he did in college with wide receiver Xavier Restrepo. And the Titans defense was honestly pretty effective last year. They only allowed just over 300 yards per game, and he returned Denard Wilson, who led this group as the DC, with now second-year head coach Brian Callahan. I'd have to imagine this helps the Titans stay as at least a decent defense, especially since they didn't have to face the absolute best offenses in their division. Overall, the Titans should be the new fun team to watch with a rookie quarterback and low expectations, and I think 7 wins is a good victory for the staff going into the third year, where he'll probably have to make the playoffs or face a firing. Somebody has to finish last, and I'm picking the Colts at 5-12. There's a lot of pressure on the coach Shane Steichen, and you're going to be in year 3 of the tenure of Steichen. He has a 500 record so far, and that probably means that any losing and he is gone. Anthony Richardson is coming into the season with a shoulder concern and still seems to have a very raw talent after coming out of Florida with minimal starting experience. Plus, Indy finished 23rd in the Sagarin ratings last year, and when you tell me that without a big coach or quarterback move, it's hard to think they're going to really jump up that list this year. And I have to say that the draft didn't seem bad, and people were excited about Tyler Warren at 14 with no trades. If you have some real players around your issues, the team can overcome a lot. But one big thing for the Colts that can pull them upwards is the offensive line. I mean, Bernhard Raimann was just re-signed. You had Quentin Nelson. He's a 7-time Pro Bowler and knows what to do. Braden Smith was also one of the better offensive linemen last year. But I believe that, unfortunately for Steichen, he's going to be out after this year, and the Colts are going to finish last as things get problematic with things like turnovers, and plus the fact that there's just no quarterback solution right now. Out in the AFC West, we're starting with the Kansas City Chiefs, 12-5. Look, they had the most wins of any team in the last decade at this point. I mean, Mahomes and Reed over so many wins alone. Kelsey is getting old as part of that main crew, but I mean, what can you do with that? Now, one thing that people are going to be eyeing with Kansas City is, well, they were lucky, won all these one-score games last year, and I'm sure people are picking them to not win the division, but it feels like every year everybody tries to get smart and pick somebody else, and it just doesn't pan out. Plus the fact that even if you give some of the opponents wins against Kansas City last year, and they don't win as many as, they ended up, I think it was 15 wins on the season. I mean, so what? They'd probably, let's say they lose 4 of those one-score games. They're still winning 11 games, and at the end of the day, I mean, the defense has been great under Steve Spagnuolo, and Josh Simmons should be good for the O-line out of Ohio State, and the times where the Chiefs have actually lost, it usually has something to do with the protection for Pat Mahomes. So I'm not even going to try to pick against this team. We've all tried it. We've all fallen for the trap, and the coach and the QB is just the best in the league with a defense that can really stop a drive. So I have this team winning a lot of games again, and I'm going to say they win the division. So the Denver Broncos should be in line for a good year, in my opinion, 11-6. Another year for Sean Payton. This is his 3rd year already. Hard to believe, but it's a tough division, but perhaps Denver will compete well because they are no worse off than a team like Los Angeles in this division, in my perspective. And a big plus for Denver is that this was one of the best defenses in the NFL last season. They really did not give up many points, and they returned 14 of their 15 players in defensive snaps from last year's team, and they only lost linebacker Cody Barton in that bunch. They also signed Dre Greenlaw and also picked up Jahdae Barron and have Defensive Player of the Year Pat Surtain II. So, I mean, that's a great look on defense. This team is also going to be a lot to handle for anyone that wants to move the ball down the field, and of course you have to score to win. So the positive there is that the Broncos have now what's probably a capable quarterback in Bo Nix, and he's matched with a veteran head coach that is definitely knowing how to develop him in Sean Payton. And with Payton, I think paired with Bo Nix, that's going to end up being a long-term solution there in Denver, and they can win some games, and I got them at 11 this year. Los Angeles at 9-8. They need an upgrade from the receiving core right now, and you can trust in Jim Harbaugh to try and steer the ship in the right direction after years of success with the Niners and a national title with Michigan. You also bring back All-Pro Derwin James for the defense. That should help in keeping things tough for the opposing offenses. One big loss is Joey Bosa, so the Chargers should hope they have enough to make up for his absence with an older Khalil Mack and others, but the receiving room should be slightly upgraded after bringing back Mike Williams. Ladd McConkey also had a good rookie season, and so he should be able to build off that. Hopefully Trey Harris can also become a big threat. Out of Ole Miss, he was one of only 2 SEC players in history to average 100 yards per game across his career. Harris was a second-team All-American last year, and we've seen a lot of Harbaugh in the offense with the run game put first when you selected Omarion Hampton, so the Chargers should trust the North North Carolina tailback to help move the chains. And I do love the Chargers in the long term, again with Jim Harbaugh, and feel like they could be in line to prize, maybe win the division, but I can't get there just yet, and they should be contending for a playoff spot and can make it, but I have this team finishing 9-8. Las Vegas just 7-10 in my opinion with this Raiders team. You're kind of in reset mode. I mean, it's a tough quarterback situation and coaching scenario. Pete Carroll is a good hire in my opinion, and a guy that is going to know how to help run a team and can get buy-in from the locker room. He also will lean into running the ball a little bit more, and that should be good without having an obvious long-term answer at quarterback right now. I believe Ashton Genty will help you lean into that run game, and hopefully he can produce in the NFL from Boise State. If some of the picks on the offensive line hit, you could also help build this team from the trenches, which is the best thing you can do right now. And you need a lot of draft players to hit and basically just start from the ground up. And you hope the defense can at least stay in the top half of the league like it was the last few years. The Raiders might have the best brand in business as well of any of the AFC West teams, and I think that's why everyone wants to get in on the ownership. So that's where they definitely beat the rest of the division. But Brock Bowers looks like a legend in the making out of Georgia, and he's going to be a nice piece. And I will say it's still hard to get extremely excited about the team without an all-star quarterback, and that's where I cool down a little bit on Vegas. We've got to see some good fight and production from the newer players, maybe win a couple games you shouldn't, and get some excitement going into 2026. And now over to the NFC, starting with the North, the Green Bay Packers I've got going 12-5, and Green Bay is a very solid team, and they never seem to really fall off, so even if they don't win the division, they can't do much worse. They finished in the top 10 in a lot of major stat categories last year. That's even against a tough schedule they played in the NFC North. A lot of people are concerned with Jordan Love's regression, and that is something to think about here. He did only throw for 25 touchdowns and 11 picks last year and completed 63.1% of his throws for over almost 3,400 yards. And as a guy who was in Michael Vick or Lamar Jackson as a runner, to make up for that, you might want more with that. But the year prior, Love had more yards and touchdowns and threw the same amount of interceptions. And for the first time in forever, the Packers went with a wideout in the first round, and Texas Matthew Golden should be a good target for Love to get the ball to. I also think it was right to focus on offense in the draft, with that group being behind the defense last season. I believe that Love can learn to make less mistakes, and he'll have a good time leaning into what's at least a decent offensive line and a good running back room. Josh Jacobs was money last season, earned a 92.3 PFF grade, third amongst qualified backs. On defense, the Packers were top 5 in yards allowed last season, which is always symbolic of a good defense, and the team was also third in interceptions, taking away 17 during the season. Plus, all-pro safety Xavier McKinney should be a problem in the secondary again for the opposing offenses. And one weird thing about the Packers that I just feel like you can say is that there isn't anywhere on the field you say maybe they have confirmed in an objective top 5 position group or spot amongst all 32 teams. And if this really is the case, you could say that maybe they're pretty good and not a great team, which could knock them down from winning the division. In second place up north, I got the Detroit Lions with 10 wins, and it's a tough thing to say, but I do think Detroit missed its best 2 chances to getting to a Super Bowl, losing a 21-point lead to San Francisco and then being upset by a young Commanders team at home. Now, they still have a lot of solid pieces, so they won't fade into the oblivion, but I see a Niners-like trajectory where they take a step back, and you do lose the mastermind Ben Johnson, who took a lot of credit for the offensive success, and you do hope Aiden Hutchinson will be able to return to form defensively after that horrid Achilles injury. He should be a really good guy to have back. The offensive line might not be as good as it was, but Jared Goff could be a quick decision maker, and it's made easier with this backfield of Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, who could honestly both be a number 1 but sort of split the action. And those two were capable of catching passes, but all of Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams, and Sam Laporta can lead that charge as one of the best groups in the NFL. And a big angle for the Lions to finish above 10 wins is the defense. They were very injured last year, and that was pretty obvious in some of the shootout games against the Packers, Bills, and the Niners. And the Commanders finished the deal with a 45 burger in the divisional round. So to me, this year's Lions team will be a big test to see how well Dan Campbell can adapt with the schemes, and to see if he can be as strong there as he is in building a great culture for the team. I got the Bears at 8-9, and Chicago has gone offensive for the first time in its history. The Bears hope that Caleb Williams will take the next step with Ben Johnson, who appears to be the next offensive genius in the league. And one big offensive move was to go and get Joe Thuney, who should help this Bears team in rebuilding the offensive line to give Williams the best chance to succeed. Rome Odunze might have been overdrafted as he only finished with 734 yards and 54 catches, but if Johnson is as good as he is on offense, I'd guess he helps Odunze thrive this season. Even if the coaching staff is a good long-term, this is still a whole new system for all the returning players to learn. And defensively, the Bears were one of the worst last year, giving up over 6,000 yards or 5.9 per play. And worse yet, the team is going to be missing all-pro corner Jalen Johnson for most of training camp with a leg injury. Hopefully guys like Shamar Turner will have a good year on the line, as he'll be crucial to try and break up the good offensive lines that are spread throughout this division. Turner was a top pass rusher in the SEC last year, and you could jump into regular playing time pretty quickly. I want to be higher on this team, but it's just hard for me to buy into that idea. Just because you get an offensive head coach that you automatically take a leap, it doesn't always pan out that way, and still, I'm not going to fault Chicago for trying, and honestly, I think it's good overall that they are taking this new direction. They do need it. And in last place, I have the Minnesota Vikings, 6 wins, 11 losses. Somebody does have to finish last, and I believe it'll be Minnesota. They are trusting in J.J. McCarthy after his injury left him out all of last year, and you do have to say at least it's probably the right thing to do considering you picked him so high, so you want to go with your guy. And Minnesota won a lot of close games last year, and they did have a really great year from Sam Darnold, but he's now gone. Because of that, winning and being in the NFC North, you're going to be playing a tough schedule, and this should help decrease the odds of more wins if you can't put magical pieces all together again. And with that said, I think there are 2 factors that can regress, and so I believe we'll see that a little bit here with the Vikings, especially when they play 3 other good teams in the NFC North. And I think bolstering the offensive line was a good move when you do consider the last time we saw the Vikings, it didn't look like Darnold was all too comfortable, so going with Donovan Jackson from Ohio State seems like a safe bet to get production. And the trend with Minnesota is that it plays above expectation than below expectation, and it's like the Vikings have these weird swings year to year, so I don't really know how much you can trust McCarthy if he has to throw the football a lot, which is probably going to be the case in this division. I see some turnovers and difficulties playing in this tough division, and with that and the regression coming from last year, I'd guess this team finishes last. Shooting to the NFC East, we have Washington at 12-5, and what a year it was for this Commanders team, and it was great to see a new player on the scene last year, and it's been a while since the Commanders have been in contention. You gotta love Jalen Daniels and what he's been able to do. A lot of the concerns about his weight and things haven't kept him down at all, and honestly, it shouldn't be too much of a concern in the future considering all the rules help protect the offensive players and stuff like that. You really just can't unload on guys like in the past, which might have been a hindrance to Daniels. And another great factor is OC Cliff Kingsbury, who does have head coaching experience but is a genius offensively, and people forget how good these guys are at coaching and creating plays. It's just hard to maintain the jobs in an NFL head coach. And one downside is the Commanders didn't have a ton of draft picks, and they were later picks as well, but you also had a big pickup with Deebo Samuel. One factor against Washington is you could say they did win a couple of games by luck or miracle. The ending to the Bears game was a Hail Mary. It really didn't make much sense, and so perhaps that keeps this team from, on paper making a giant win-loss leap, but we can really sit here and play that game with every one of these teams, so I wouldn't be too worried about it as a Commanders fan when you do have the talent and potential this team does. I would also potentially be a little worried about the second-year regression for Daniels. I mean, this is only because CJ Stroud had a familiar great year 1 recently and then proceeded to struggle in year 2, so maybe with more tape these defensive coordinators can find something to counter Daniels, and I'm guessing he's going to be fine, but something to think about. Overall, this team is a great position long-term, but you want to see a defensive leap after last year's team, and they would just give up too much for the offense to overcome. And I have Philadelphia finishing 11-6. Congrats to them for dominating their way to a Super Bowl championship last year. You blew out the final 2 teams you played. You crushed Kansas City in front of millions in New Orleans, and this team could fall down for a while, and people they're just never going to forget that Super Bowl win. It's always going to be a special thing, and so nonetheless, Philly should be pretty set up to try and defend their title in the NFC this season. You bring back Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts, and a lot of people had concerns with Nick Sirianni after the way 2023 awkwardly ended, which looking back still makes no sense to me. Like, how did that team just randomly lose so many in a row? But they went to 2 Super Bowls in between that stretch of randomly losing 7 in a row in these 3 years. It just doesn't make sense. It's got to be studied. A good thing with Philadelphia is they've now had Howie Roseman, a GM, for a long time, and he's managed 2 Super Bowls now, so it appears he really knows what he's doing and how to keep it going after a championship. So some teams almost seem to collapse quickly after winning it all, and they almost try to retain all the pieces and stuff, and it doesn't work out. But you can trust Roseman to know how to retain and who to retain in this situation, who you need to replace, etc. So Philly is in a really good spot right now, and it's simply for the fact that it's the NFL that I'm not picking them to win the division again. Well, I got Dallas at 8-9, and Dallas got rid of Mike McCarthy. They're going with the big hire of Brian Schottenheimer. A lot of people weren't thrilled, but I mean, who knows what's really going to happen. And I honestly believe this could be better than hiring Deion Sanders right now, because just looking at the actual coaching history of Deion, he's still kind of young and doing that. So I mean, being an NFL coach that early can honestly go wrong. And I do believe that the offense should really improve if Dak Prescott can play a whole season, and that's just going to give you some consistency offensively, and they can put up some points for sure if CeeDee Lamb is out wide too. But I would be a little concerned about the offensive line and how that's going to be fully formed, and you do need to see some of the defensive picks really hit here, and quarterback Siobhan Ravel Jr. to pan out, amongst the other picks, but that's because the defense was 31st in the NFL last year in points allowed, and they just had issues all over. Now, plus you've got the recent Micah Parsons news, and he wants to be out of town too, but hopefully Solomon Thomas can also help out, and if he does, and the offense is healthy, they can win some games and potentially gun for a wild card. I'm just not sure about contending for a Super Bowl. Well, I do hate to see people get fired because I just imagine it's devastating, but I think Brian Daboll isn't long for New York, and I predict his Giants going 4-13. To some degree, he isn't to blame, and I think the biggest mistake was giving Daniel Jones serious money after that decent 2021 season, and I'm pretty sure Daboll wasn't really the one making that decision, but it locked him into the biggest asset, which ended up struggling a lot. And Abdul Carter should be a home run, but that might not be enough in the draft. And I also thought that Dart pick at 25 was okay, but he did have college concerns, and just again with the positions around him in question, it could be really tough if he gets early action. I mean, Russell Wilson should be pretty steady, but last time we saw Wilson in an unsteady system was with the Broncos in 2022, and things went so far south it was honestly hard to believe. The Giants might do a little better than I project from the standpoint that they play in the NFC East, which is kind of a gettable division maybe, but we'll have to see. I mean, I still believe the Giants are finishing last in this division. In the NFC South, I'm going to go with Carolina at 10-7 to win it, and they had a solid finish to the end of last year. The offense has showed some competence, and I liked a lot of the names in the draft too. I'm probably a little high on this team, but you do got to pick some, groups to jump, and I believe Carolina is going to be one, and we'll need to see more of the Bryce Young that finished last season to do that too. Panthers had 44 against Atlanta, 36 against Arizona, and it did seem like Young had figured something out there with Dave Canales and Brad Idzik behind him, but the problem is the defense here, and that was honestly dead last in 2024. Just too many points to overcome, and if you can at least jump to be a decent defense, that's going to go a long way. And the Panthers signed a lot of defensive players in free agency, and they're going to need guys like J.C. Horn and former Chief Tershawn Wharton to really make an impact. And you could argue the Panthers reached taking, McMillan from Arizona at 8 instead of getting a defensive guy. But again, they are banking on the signings to cover that, and we'll see what happens with the Panthers, but I think they could pop a bit, win the division, and, and get something going here. So Tampa Bay I have at 9-8, and there's really a lot to like for sure about the Bucs. I mean, Baker Mayfield has been better over the years and is probably a top 10 QB. You got weapons galore offensively with a top back and passing attack that just tore up defenses last year. I would be concerned about the health of that core, however, with Mike Evans missing time, and Chris Godwin also had a bad dislocation last year. Luckily, it looks like the team did find another good receiver, though, in Emeka Egbuka in the first round, an Ohio State guy, and you think he's going to be great in the slot with Mayfield, and also OSU just puts out a ton of great receivers, so I'm sure he'll work out. But speaking of, as later July, we've seen, a lot of injuries to guys like David Walker, and he's going to miss the entire season with a torn ACL, and the Bucs training camp also started with Tristan Wirfs, Chris Godwin, Michael Pratt, and more on the PUP, and so we're going to have to see if the defense can turn around a bit too, as the team last year was a bit susceptible. Two teams that could pass the ball well, allowing nearly 4,200 yards through the air, so I'm going to say the Bucs at 9 wins. Atlanta at 7-10. There's a weird QB dynamic here with Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix, but I'm sure that Penix will be the starter here for a bit, and we could see that being a bit of a struggle earlier in the season, and the schedule also lightens up later on, and that could be a late run like Carolina had last year. It's also going to be a big season for tight end Kyle Pitts, who's expected to make some leap after some good seasons over the last few years, and an insane season as a rookie back in 2021. Pitts is looking for a big contract this year. One concern for Atlanta is health, and Jalen Walker missing practice does not help, especially for a swing team like Atlanta. The Falcons probably need some of the chips to fall their way, and this kind of thing makes it a little concerning. The biggest strength of this team is probably going to be in the backs room, where you've got Robinson and Algier, and these two receive top PFF grades as rushers, and the eye test definitely backs that up. Now, the defense will definitely need improvement from last year because Jimmy Lake was fired after just 1 year, and so hopefully Jeff Ulbrich can be that answer, and I think he should be able to help this team defensively after leading the Jets over the last few years. But to second that last year's defense, give it up about 25 a game. The offense scored about 23, and people were disappointed with the offense, but there's plenty of potential, at least potential answers from Penix to Kyle Pitts, just mentioning a couple. But I think the defense is going to need some of these guys to show up, and that will be ultimately giving me some doubt on the Falcons making a leap. I've got New Orleans at 5-12 to finish last, and I think the Saints had more questions than answers at the end of the season. You bring in Kellen Moore to be the head coach, and you have to think that should work out well, as he just led the Eagles' great offense to a title. But I will say that bringing in the younger offensive-minded OC to be the head coach has been the move for many teams, and only so many work out in the long run, so who really knows? And another thing is basically any coach isn't lasting very long until they get a quarterback, and that's where the Saints are going to need Tyler Shue or somebody to make a big impact. I did like the pick of Kelvin Banks Jr., but I do wonder if the Saints are really in rebuild mode here for this season and almost not trying to win too much if they're already running for Arch Manning or somebody next season. And it still looks like the Saints need more pieces to get up to speed, and I just don't think they finish better than fourth. Out in the NFC West, I have LA winning the division here with an 11-6 record, and the Rams, they've just been very dependable and a pretty good team under Sean McVay. They are due to improve again, in my opinion, because they have a young defense that made plays last year, and I think you can get enough out of Matt Stafford with his age to get something done. Now, your best bargaining chip with the LA Rams is they played Philly to a one-score game on the road in the playoffs, and that's a team that blew out the hot Commanders in the NFC Championship and then torched the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. So looking back, that's pretty impressive, and one thing people are waiting on is to see if Matt Stafford has any prime years left. He's 37, and at that age, people start asking when you will, quote, fall off the cliff, and so if that dramatic drop in production occurs for Stafford, that could take a lot of the potential of the team with him. But as long as he's okay, they've got some good weapons on the outside. You just brought in veteran receiver Devontae Adams, who will know how to get open and be a reliable target even at the older age, and that's in addition to Puka Nacua, who's been the #1 target out of BYU. He should be ready to go for the full season after only 11 last year. So one thing that could be awkward for LA is they did not have a first-round pick, and they didn't get any of the highest blue-chip prospects, but that is hardly the worst thing, and at the end of the day, like half the league's rosters are made up of guys who don't even get drafted. Now, defensively, Jared Verse looks like a beast and just won Defensive Rookie of the Year as well, and he actually led all rookies in QB hits, pressures, and hurries. He was second amongst rookies in tackles for losses, so he played in all 17, made 16 starts, and totaled 66 tackles. So Verse leads that young defense that, had other standouts like Cameron Kitchens and Jalen McCullough, and others like Braden Fiskey are helping hold it down on the defensive line. So if people remain healthy, I think the Rams have enough and momentum to win another game or two and end up taking the NFC West in 2025. I've got San Francisco at 10-7. They've been a blue chip too in recent years, and they're never going to be too far out of the race, even when it feels like they're rebuilding. They had a lot of draft picks this year, and they did pretty well at that with John Lynch. So I do believe that you got caught in an awkward situation with the Brock Purdy contract, but you've got someone locked in there for years. I think the main issue for the Niners is managing all that they're trying to shed from their Super Bowl years. That core got older, and so now you're tasked with bringing in new guys, and luckily they did have a record 11 picks under Lynch and Shanahan, so they led with the defense, and that probably makes sense considering what you just invested on the offense. I also think that it was good to hire Saleh back as the DC. He did a great job in that role for the years he was there before the Jets head coaching job, and you also have a pretty decent scheduling setup, so apparently the Niners have the easiest schedule in the NFL, at least going off of last year's results, so that's something that could be a big boost, and I'm not sure the Niners will be the first on my Super Bowl bingo card, but again, they should be in position to win and probably finish over 500 and vie for a playoff spot. So Arizona's at 8-9, and I wrote the report on the Cardinals last because I just felt like they haven't been covered or as easy to follow, I don't know, without the splashy moves, and I think the big storyline is probably Kyler Murray. He returns after injuries riddled the season in 23 and 22, and he's still a two-time Pro Bowler and played in all 17 games last year and did complete a high percentage of the throws, but did throw some picks as well and finished with just 21 passing touchdowns. And Murray's a capable runner, but did cause some issues out of the pocket. You wonder how much he'll be able to continue to do that as his career goes along. The Cardinals went heavy on defense in the draft, and they selected only one offensive piece, Hayden Connor, for the O-line out of Texas. That would imply that this team had basically Carolina's 2024 defense, but they were actually about average last year defensively, so this was a bit interesting. And a big offensive guy to watch is Marvin Harrison. Some thought he was going to be Jamar Chase right out of college, but it appears he's going to need some more development. I think he's still good in his rookie year, or going out of his rookie year. Walter Knoll has already suffered a calf injury, which is unfortunate as he was the top pick for the Cardinals, and you want him in practice. I would say it's maybe a negative sense of foreshadowing to me that the biggest thing with the Cardinals will be health this year, so I'd imagine the offensive chemistry would grow with guys like Murray and Harrison through another full year, and they could be really good, but I just don't know if Murray will stay healthy through the whole season. Additionally, this is a pretty tough division with the Niners and Rams set to be good, and the Seahawks are last for me, but they do have a lot of talent, so I'm cautiously putting the Cardinals at just 8 wins. Seattle at 6-11. Well, it's certainly a bit short-minded and too simplistic to look at coach and quarterback and make your picks in this league, so sorry in advance, but I'm just going to have to dumb this down, and I think coach and QB QB tells the story. Sam Darnold had a really good year last year, but I find it almost disturbing that the Vikings wanted to get rid of him, and I think they saw the writing on the wall. Darnold did not look as good in the last few games and also had a good receiving core that was led by Justin Jefferson. You just don't get that in Seattle, and it's a big concern for me as I feel like we might see a regression in Darnold back to the majority of what we have seen in the past, and you also lose top target DK Metcalf, which probably isn't helping the cause, and I think Gray Zabel should be great for the line, and Arroyo is a big body tight end, so I almost hope for Jalen Milroe's sake he isn't in too early to replace Darnold. If things go south, getting almost thrown to the wolves early could be bad for his development, but we'll see. So on to the playoffs. In the NFC, we'll have Green Bay the 1 seed, Commanders 2, Rams are 3, Panthers as the last division winner at 4, Philly, Detroit, San Francisco, 5, 6, 7 of the wild cards. In the AFC, you'll have Buffalo as the 1 seed, Kansas City 2, Cincinnati 3, Jacksonville 4, Denver, Baltimore, and Houston, the final 3 wild card spots. And into the playoff results, we're starting in the AFC in the wild card. I'm going to have to say Kansas City beats Houston there with a 31-20 decision over the Texans and gets the job done. Cincinnati, I'll have winning by Baltimore, only a point. That's going to be a complete coin flip to me, but I'll get the Bengals with the home field advantage winning. Jacksonville against Denver, I'd say the Broncos squeak by with a nice road win under Sean Payton. And checking in on the NFC wildcard results, I'm going to say Washington is beaten by the 49ers, and they get upset by a really good 49ers team that knows what they're doing, been in the playoffs before with Shanahan, and gets an upset win. LA in their game against Detroit, I'll have winning 30-28. Close but fun game where Sean McVay pulls something out at the end with Stafford. Carolina and Philadelphia, I'll say the Eagles show some shades of the 2024 championship team and wins big over Carolina on the road. In the division round in the AFC, I'll say Buffalo gets a win by just 4 points over Denver, who with that defense can keep it close but ultimately goes down on the road. And Kansas City, I hate to say it for you Cincinnati fans out there, but I'm going to say they squeak by with another field goal win in the playoffs and just move on. So in the division round in the NFC, I'll say Green Bay does bounce back and they beat San Francisco in their first game, or at least a bounce back against the Niners upset. And I have the Rams winning against Philadelphia. Final score there 23-21 at a very close battle. I'll say the Rams defense are able to prevent the Philly offense in that one from getting the win. And on to our conference championship, Buffalo and Kansas City. I'm going to have the Bills. After years of frustration, after years of messing it up at the 11th hour, I'll say they actually beat Kansas City, and by some margin. I think the Bills they're super set up, they're stacked. One of these days, how many times can you roll the dice before, they land on heads, which is what they call, I guess. They've got to one day beat Kansas City, you'd imagine, after just so many times being in that spot, and I'll say they finally do it this year. And on the NFC side, Green Bay and Los Angeles, I'm going to say the Packers squeak by the Rams by a field goal, and they end up getting to the Super Bowl. I really like the Packers in terms of what they have all around the field, and just feel like there's a lot of pretty strong position groups. Maybe if they're not the absolute best, there's still a lot impressive about this team. All right, guys, so in the Super Bowl, I'm sure the Chiefs are going to mess this up, but I'm going with the Buffalo Bills and Green Bay Packers in the big bowl, and I'm going to say Josh Allen gets his first ring in early 2026. There's just got to be a point where things work out for this team after being in prime playoff position every single year, and I guess you can also say the same about teams like the Ravens and the Bengals, but we got to pick somebody to break through out of that bunch. So I think Green Bay is very steady on both offense and defense from last year, and with continuity in a lot of spots like coach and quarterback, I can see this team getting through a harder to predict NFC if they get hot at the right time. So under our awards here, we're covering the major awards. The Super Bowl MVP, I'm going Josh Allen. He's obviously the leader of the Bills, and if they do drop 31 like I predict, that's going to be probably a good day for the offense, and Allen should have his fingerprints on that. And I'm going to say Joe Burrow wins MVP. Look, last year was great. The only thing that held him from the MVP was the win category, so if he gets into the postseason here and has numbers anything like last year, I think he wins MVP. Offensive Player of the Year, I'm going Christian McCaffrey to come back and have a good year with the Niners. He should be fully healthy. If he does stay healthy, I think he can win this award. Defensive Player of the Year, Max Crosby from the Raiders. This guy is an absolute beast, a wrecking ball, and he's going to have the opportunity not only to get after people, but against meaningful quarterbacks there in the AFC West like Pat Mahomes. That'll help him out. And the Offensive Rookie of the Year, I'm going to go Cam Ward with the Titans to make some plays and pick up that award. I believe in a new system offensively, he's got at least a little bit of a gunslinger mentality to make something happen. And the Defensive Rookie of the Year, Abdul Carter, just seems like a surefire talent to me. I'm sure he'll cause damage with the Giants defense. The Comeback Player of the Year, Aiden Hutchinson. We know the devastating injury last year. He was great prior, so I'd guess he comes back and is productive and wins the award. Coach of the year Sean Payton. I'm saying he nearly wins that division with the Chiefs, but competes with them till the end, has a nice upset win in the playoffs, and gets named the coach of the year. So that's my big prediction for the 2025 NFL season. As mentioned, I'm hoping for no insane injuries or something that will completely crack the entire thing, but that's also part of this, so oh well. Drop some comments and a like down below if you have any thoughts. Feel free to subscribe if you like content like this. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next video.